I was sitting quietly in my chair that evening, the house still carrying the scent of the wood I once carved with pride. My daughter stormed in, her voice sharp as a blade. "You're useless. Dad, just watch my kids while I travel. That's all you're good for." Her words hit me harder than the years of labor I'd endured. I looked at the faces of my grandchildren, innocent and unaware, and I swallowed the pain, keeping silent. What she didn't know was that silence does not mean weakness. I had been planning, waiting, and keeping something she never imagined, something that would turn her arrogance into regret. She believed she could erase me, but she never saw the move I was about to make. Late afternoon sunlight spilled through the thin curtains of my old house in Asheville, laying streaks of gold across the worn oak floor. The quiet rhythm of the day was something I had grown used to, a rhythm of solitude since my wife passed. That rhythm broke the moment the front door swung open. Darlene stormed in, her heels clattering against the hardwood. The air around her was charged with impatience, as if she had been rehearsing her anger all the way here. "You're useless. Dad, just watch my kids while I travel." Her words cut through the room, sharper than any chisel I had ever held in my carpenter's hands. The weight of those words pressed hard, but silence was my answer. Years of swallowing hurt had taught me how to endure. I wanted to remind her that I had a doctor's appointment, that my heart wasn't as steady as it once was. The phone on the table had rung earlier from the hospital, but I let it sit there, blinking quietly. Instead of arguing, I picked it up and canceled the appointment. Her needs, once again, took precedence over mine. The familiar ache spread in my chest, not from the heart, but from the soul. Memories of long nights at the workshop surfaced. My calloused hands had built this house, beam by beam, every nail driven with thoughts of giving my daughter a safe place to grow. Now those same hands trembled as I folded the note of my canceled visit. Am I really useless? The thought crept in, bitter and unwelcome. The grandchildren's laughter and shrieks filled the background. Their joy was a balm and a sting at once. I adored them. Yet standing in the same room, I felt invisible. Darlene moved briskly, tossing clothes into her suitcase, never once meeting my eyes. There was something strange in her preparation, too casual, too eager. "Business trip," she said, but it looked more like escape. My gaze shifted to a family photo resting on the mantel. The glass caught the light, but what struck me was the edge of the picture, where my own face had been snipped out. I looked away quickly, heart sinking, not ready to confront what that meant. The suitcase snapped shut, without so much as a thank you. Darlene hoisted it up, swung the door wide, and disappeared into the evening. The slam echoed through the house, leaving me with the children and the heavy silence that followed. I sat back, the old clock ticking above me, each beat loud and steady, marking the emptiness of the room. A whisper escaped my lips, meant only for myself. I've been silent too long. The air felt different then, heavy but alive, as if something deep inside had shifted. My patience, long stretched thin, was beginning to fray. The morning came quietly, the kind of stillness that felt more like absence than peace. Toys lay scattered across the living room from the grandchildren's play the night before, bending down to gather them. My joints stiffened, reminding me of the years carved into these old bones. The house carried an emptiness without my wife's voice, without her touch that used to fill even silence with warmth. On the wall, my eyes landed on a photo of us all together, a family portrait that should have been a source of pride. Instead, it felt like a wound. My face had been cut out, replaced with nothing but blank space, as if I had never stood there at all. The sight pierced deeper than any words Darlene had thrown at me. On the kitchen counter, among crumbs and folded bills, a brightly colored envelope caught my eye. A birthday card for Darlene's son, written in cheerful ink. Each family member's signature was neatly penned, but mine was absent. The card was complete without me, just as the photo had been. The realization spread like frost across my chest. I wasn't simply overlooked. I was being erased, piece by piece, stroke by stroke. My presence was vanishing from the very story I had sacrificed decades to build. The card in my hands pulled me back to memories I couldn't shake. Years ago, those birthdays were mine to organize cakes I baked with clumsy hands, balloons I inflated until my chest hurt, the little wooden toys I carved late into the night. Laughter once echoed through these walls because of those efforts. Now, standing in the same space, the contrast was too sharp. I had become a shadow, stripped of acknowledgement, a thought hardened inside if silence continued. Soon I would not exist to them at all. Sitting at the kitchen table, the card trembling between my fingers, I asked myself questions no father should ever have to ask. Had my quiet compliance, my endless endurance, made me a partner in this slow erasure? The clock on the wall ticked louder than ever, each second a reminder of fading time and fading worth. My heart urged me toward something different, not open defiance. Not yet, but watchfulness. Proof was what I needed. Evidence, the quiet strength to observe without being blinded by my own hurt. Slipping the card into my pocket, a chill ran down my back. From the next room, Darlene's voice drifted in a low whisper, sharp and deliberate. "Don't worry, he won't be a problem. He's too old to notice." The words cut deeper than the missing signature or the mutilated photograph. They confirmed what I had begun to fear: this wasn't accident or neglect. It was intention. And as the afternoon light shifted, a knock sounded at the front door. My neighbor's familiar voice carried through the wood. In that instant, I knew my private shame was about to step out into the open, where others could see exactly what was happening inside these walls. The echo of Darlene's whispered words from the night before clung to me like a shadow I couldn't shake. Morning passed with the usual clatter of children and the hollow silence of my thoughts. And by afternoon, the weight in my chest felt heavier than my old heart could bear. A knock rattled the front door, sharp and unexpected. Startled, I rose from my worn chair, the birthday card still pinched between my fingers. Opening the door, I found Harlan standing there, my neighbor for more than 30 years. His kind eyes took in my unsettled expression before drifting toward the card in my hand. Before I could offer a word, Darlene's voice cut down the hallway, sharp and commanding. She crossed her arms and barked at me. "Dad, keep the kids out of sight and quiet. You're standing there like you've got nothing else to do." Her tone sliced the air, and I saw Harlan's brow crease, his polite smile faltering. He stepped inside reluctantly, shuffling his feet on the rug. The grandchildren bustled in from the living room, one tugging at my sleeve, his small voice asking me to play. My heart lifted for an instant, but Darlene snapped. "Stop spoiling him. Dad, you make it worse." Harlan shifted uncomfortably, glancing at me as though unsure whether to stay or leave. That glance told me everything. My humiliation was no longer hidden behind closed doors. Now, others could see. That evening, the humiliation deepened. Darlene arranged a small family dinner with a couple of neighbors invited. I was told I could join, though I suspected the offer came more from appearance than sincerity. The dining table shone with polished silverware, and laughter circled easily around it. Yet when I entered, no place was saved for me. Instead, a folding chair sat awkwardly near the bathroom door. That was to be my seat. Each time the door swung open with a clatter, the smell of disinfectant and damp towels wafted toward me, mixing bitterly with the aroma of roasted chicken. I sat down quietly, the chair creaking with every slight movement, across the table. Harlan's eyes met mine briefly, before dropping away in pity. My chest burned with shame as muffled laughter filled the room, laughter that seemed to pass through me as though I were invisible. Every bite I swallowed tasted like ash. Darlene caught my eye once, the faint curl of a smile tugging at her lips, as if satisfied with the spectacle of my silence. But inside, silence was not surrender. Each clatter of silverware, each squeak of the chair, carved deeper lines into a memory I would not forget. The thought settled like iron. They believed quietness meant weakness, but quietness remembered everything. After dinner, I slipped out to the porch. The night air cooled the sting in my face, though the ache in my chest lingered. I stood before the window, looking at the darkened glass. My reflection stared back faint, almost ghost-like, a man half erased. For a fleeting moment, I felt her, my late wife, standing beside me as she once did. Her voice whispered through memory. Soft but firm, don't let them erase you. Don't let them take away what you built. The hair on my arms rose. The ache inside shifted into something sharper. A push forward. I knew then the time for waiting in silence was nearing its end. That night, I resolved to search through the old drawers, through the things she left behind. Somewhere in those keepsakes lay her final gift to me, a reminder of who I was, and the strength I still carried. The walk back from Darlene's house felt heavier than it should have for a man my age. My chest tightened with every step, a dull ache radiating through me, not just the kind of pain a doctor could measure with machines, but the kind that seeps into the bones when dignity is stripped away. The echo of laughter from that dinner still clung to me like smoke. When I reached the porch, the night was cool, carrying the faint scent of pine from the woods nearby. I leaned against the railing for a moment, letting the boards creak under my weight. My heart pounded, a steady reminder that I wasn't as strong as I used to be. And yet, it wasn't weakness I felt most. It was the burn of disrespect. Darlene appeared at the door before I could even turn the knob, arms folded, her face tight with disapproval. She spoke as if I were a child caught misbehaving. Don't make a scene again. Dad, you're embarrassing us. Her words landed harder than the ache in my chest. I stared at her for a long moment, then brushed past without replying. Inside, silence filled the rooms, a silence thick with unsaid things. Sunday came quicker than I wanted. The family was gathering again at Darlene's place for another meal. I walked through her front door, the smell of roast and cornbread lingering in the air. For a brief second, I thought maybe today would be different. Maybe she would see me, not as a burden, but as part of the family I helped build. That hope lasted about as long as it took her to point toward the back of the room. You're not sitting here, she announced flatly, gesturing to the table where the others were already gathering. Sit in the back. The room went still. Even the clatter of utensils paused. My grandchildren looked at me, their young eyes confused, not fully grasping the cruelty, but sensing its weight. I swallowed hard and obeyed, taking the chair in the corner as if exile had become my place. The chair squeaked when I lowered myself into it, the sound sharp against the quiet. Every bite I took was marked by the murmur of conversation that no longer included me. As I sat there, I heard a low chuckle from across the table. Inez, a distant relative who rarely showed up unless there was food involved, leaned in just enough for others to hear. Then who even needs you? She muttered, lips curling in a smirk. A ripple of laughter followed, quick and mean. It wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. The sting was sharp enough. My fork trembled in my hand. I stared down at my plate, each bite tasting of humiliation. Inside, though, something steadier began to form. A thought, a promise. They think silence means weakness, but silence remembers. After the meal, I stepped onto the porch, the boards cool under my worn shoes. Darlene followed, her voice already sharp. "You made things awkward again," she scolded, shaking her head. I turned to her, calm but firm. "You're pushing me too far." "Darlene," she laughed, a dismissive sound, like I was nothing more than a grumpy old man. "You won't do anything. Dad, you never do." Her words were a dismissal, a shove into the shadows, but I didn't rise to the bait. Instead, I let the silence hang heavy between us, gripping the porch railing. My hands trembled, not just from age, but from the pounding in my chest. Each beat felt like a hammer, driving home a truth I could no longer ignore. This wasn't weakness, it was warning, and I had just given her the last one. Inside me, resolve stirred. The next time she crossed that line, silence would no longer be my shield. It would be my weapon. The house was quiet, but the silence didn't comfort me. It pressed against me like a weight I couldn't shake. After the porch confrontation with Darlene earlier that evening, sleep refused to come. My chest ached with every breath, not just from my fragile heart, but from the disrespect that lingered like a bruise on my soul. The clock in the hallway ticked too loudly, each second a reminder of how alone I had become. The children upstairs slept soundly, their small breaths rising and falling without a care in the world. I paced the floor, restless, my mind chasing shadows of the past. I could almost hear her, my wife's voice, soft, steady, carrying the strength I leaned on for decades. "Don't let them take your dignity," she used to say whenever life tried to wear me down. Those words echoed now, more real than the silence surrounding me. A sudden need stirred inside me. Stronger than the fear or the pain, I wandered into my bedroom, a place that held more memories than comfort. The air smelled faintly of wood polish, from the carpenter's tools I hadn't touched in years. My hands, though stiff with age, opened a drawer I had avoided since the day she passed. Dust clung to its edges, and inside, time seemed to wait for me. There they were, faded photographs, scraps of projects I once built, and beneath them, an envelope. My heart skipped. The handwriting on it was hers. My wife's delicate script curved across the paper, "For when you feel alone." My hands trembled as I tore it open. Her words were brief, but they cut deep. "Don't let them take from you what you've built. Remember who you are." I sat down hard on the edge of the bed, the paper shaking between my fingers. A sob rose in my chest, but no tears came. Grief had carved me hollow long ago. Yet tonight her voice filled the emptiness. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt a flicker of strength burn through the sorrow. The ring of the phone jolted me back. It was late, too late for anyone to call casually. I picked it up, and the voice on the other end belonged to the hospital. A reminder. Calm and rehearsed, I had missed another cardiology appointment. They urged me to reschedule soon. My chest tightened, not from fear of the illness, but from the realization I'd canceled those visits, my health, my very life, all to cover for Darlene's demands. Babysitting, cooking, keeping her world spinning while mine crumbled. Anger welled up, sharp and hot. Anger at her. Yes, but mostly at myself. How had I let it get this far? I had built this house with my hands. Every nail, every beam carried my sweat, my sacrifices, and now I was letting them strip me of my worth. Piece by piece, I folded the letter carefully, pressing it against my chest. Then I slid it into the inside pocket of my jacket, close enough to feel over my heart. The paper crinkled softly, like her whisper traveling with me. The rooms around me looked different now. Not just empty, but stolen. This was the home where my wife laughed, where my children once ran with joy. Now it was filled with commands, dismissals, and the stench of control. Inside my mind, a voice stronger than despair rose up. "I will not vanish. I will not be erased." I moved into the kitchen, the weight of determination grounding me. The table felt cold beneath my hands as I laid the envelope beside me. The ticking of the clock seemed to slow, waiting, as though time itself was holding its breath. Then I heard it again. Darlene's voice, muffled, floating from the other room. She thought I was asleep. The house. Papers. He won't notice. My blood froze. The words coiled around me, suffocating and clear. This wasn't just about disrespect. She wasn't only erasing me from memories. She was reaching for something bigger, something I had built with a lifetime of sacrifice. The house. My grip tightened on the table. The letter rustled in my pocket like a living thing, urging me forward. The morning light crept in slowly through the thin curtains, and with it came a stubborn heaviness I couldn't shake. The letter from my late wife rested inside my jacket pocket, close to my chest, and the words she'd written echoed with every beat of my heart. Don't let them take from you what you've built. That sentence had lived with me all night, rattling around like an old nail in a carpenter's toolbox, sharp and unyielding. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of my silence pressing down harder than my aching bones. I shuffled toward the wooden chest at the back of my bedroom, the one I'd tucked away beneath piles of clothes and tools. Inside it, I knew, was a piece of my life that could not be rewritten, not even by my daughter's schemes. The phone rang, its shrill tone slicing through the quiet morning. My hands trembled as I picked up. A stern female voice introduced herself, crisp and businesslike. I'm calling on behalf of your daughter. Darlene, are you prepared to sign the property papers today as discussed? The breath caught in my throat. Property papers. My grip on the receiver tightened until my knuckles whitened. I muttered something about needing time, and she pressed again, impatient. She assured us this was settled. We can send someone over immediately. The betrayal cut deeper than I thought possible. Not only had she plotted behind my back, she had set the stage as if my approval were a mere formality. Hanging up. My heart thundered in my chest. I went straight to the chest, pulling it open. The smell of aged wood and dust rose to meet me. My fingers dug past faded photos and rusted screws until I touched the worn edges of the deed. There it was, my name, clear and bold. The house still belonged to me. Beside it, almost like a hidden blessing, lay a folded piece of paper with my wife's handwriting. Her will, unsigned by any lawyer, but real. Her words carved into the page like she had known this day would come. This house is his. Do not let anyone strip away his dignity. Tears welled, though I blinked them back, letting her strength seep into me. Later that afternoon, a knock rattled the doorframe. I opened it to find a local banker, hat in hand, his face pale. Sir, he began cautiously. Your daughter asked me to bring over co-signature forms. She implied you were ready. He shifted on his feet, clearly uneasy. I looked him square in the eye, steady and sharp. Tell her this, I built this house. I paid for every nail and board, and I will not co-sign away my life's work. My voice, though calm, carried enough force to make him step back. His nod was quick, and he left without another word. As the evening settled, I overheard Darlene again. Her voice, sharp as glass, cut through the thin walls. He's stalling, but I'll handle it, even if I have to forge his name. My hand closed around the envelope in my pocket, pressing it so tightly the paper crinkled against my palm. The line between endurance and retaliation had never been so thin. Tomorrow would bring a choice I could no longer delay to reveal what I held or wait for the moment she least expected. The battle lines had been drawn, and for once, I wasn't standing on the weaker side. The morning carried a strange stillness, heavier than usual. The house that once echoed with my wife's laughter and the sounds of children felt foreign, like I had woken up in someone else's life. I stepped onto the porch with a cup of coffee, hoping the warmth might calm the unease pressing into my chest. Across the street, Neighbors who once waved now turned their eyes to the ground. A few whispered, heads bent close together, and quickly walked away. It didn't take long to understand. Darlene had started planting seeds of doubt in their minds, reshaping me from father and grandfather into some caricature of a bitter old man. I knew that silence would only let the story grow stronger. The air felt colder, as though my own town had shifted one step further from me. By midday, the phone rang. The banker's voice quivered more than mine. He told me a document had surfaced with my signature on it, papers transferring property rights. My hand froze against the receiver. I had never touched such a paper, let alone signed it. The words slipped from his mouth carefully, but the weight of them slammed into me like a hammer. My name, my life's work, the roof over my head stolen by a stroke of a pen that wasn't mine. The betrayal cut deeper than any insult. My daughter's voice still echoed from the night before. He's stalling, but I'll handle it. And now I knew exactly how. Rage burned hot in my veins, but beneath it sat a cold clarity. She hadn't just dismissed me. She had decided to erase me altogether. That afternoon, I walked into town, the familiar streets suddenly sharper, less welcoming. I pushed open the heavy oak door of a law office where I'd once built the window frames years ago. A younger attorney looked up, but then an older man I knew, James Holloway, a lawyer with silver hair and weary eyes, recognized me. I laid the papers on his desk, my original deed, still bearing my name, and my late wife's will, written in her careful hand. He listened without interruption as I explained, showing him the forged signature. His brows furrowed deeper with each word. "You have to act quickly," he said, voice low. "If this goes through, you may not just lose the house. You could lose everything tied to your name." Urgency pounded in my ears. I realized then that I wasn't only fighting for bricks and wood. I was fighting for my wife's memory, for the respect I had earned, and for the dignity Darlene wanted stripped from me. The papers I held were more than evidence, they were a lifeline, proof that I still mattered. That evening, before I could even gather myself, Darlene showed up with her husband and the kids. They carried takeout bags, laughing as though they were doing me a favor. My table became their stage, between bites of chicken and mashed potatoes. Darlene leaned back smugly, talking about future plans for the house, new paint, knocking down a wall, maybe even selling a piece of land. She spoke as though I wasn't there, as if she were already the owner. Each word scraped against me, but I didn't rise to it. I let her talk, every slip of arrogance, every careless remark, I memorized. My silence wasn't weakness this time. It was steel, holding steady until the right moment. Her husband's chuckle grated worse than her words. But I stayed still, though my hand curled tight under the table. When dinner ended, they gathered their things, laughter still in their throats. Just before leaving, her husband leaned close, sliding a thick envelope across the table. His breath carried the sourness of cheap whiskey as he muttered, "Sign it tonight, old man, or you'll regret it." His hand pressed the envelope against mine with just enough force to make the threat clear. The door closed behind them, but the weight of their presence lingered like a stain in the air. My hands trembled as I picked up the envelope, not from fear, but from the certainty forming inside me. In one hand, I held their false paper, a forgery, a weapon meant to erase me. In the other, my wife's will, her words like a shield. "Don't let them take what you've built." For the first time in months, maybe years, my decision was sharp, unclouded. The storm they had stirred was about to break, and this time, I wasn't stepping aside. The day of the so-called family meeting hung over me like a storm cloud. Darlene's voice on the phone had been sharp, almost triumphant, when she insisted everyone gather at her house. I knew her well enough to understand this wasn't about healing wounds. This was about cementing control, walking through the neighborhood that afternoon. The air felt heavier than usual. Neighbors who once greeted me with easy smiles now turned their eyes away, whispers passing between them like a current. Word of her lies had begun to spread, and the weight of their silence pressed harder than their words. When I arrived, the living room was already packed. Cousins, distant relatives, even neighbors were there, all seated as if waiting for a spectacle. Darlene stood near the center, her posture proud, holding a set of papers like a stage actress holding her script. "Dad's memory isn't what it used to be," she announced, her voice sweetened with false concern. "We're just helping him transition. He signed these papers himself." My chest burned as she lifted the forged document into the air like proof of her righteousness. Murmurs rippled across the room, some nodding, others frowning. For a moment, the shame of being paraded like an invalid in front of family and neighbors felt unbearable. Heat climbed my neck, but I forced myself to remain still. The old man they thought too frail, too confused, too silent he would speak, but not in the way they expected. Slowly, I reached into my jacket and laid 2 documents on the table, the original deed to the house, my name bold and clear, and my wife's will in her familiar handwriting. The shift in the room was immediate. Gasps, the shuffle of feet, eyes darting between me and Darlene. Her confident mask slipped for the first time, panic flickering across her face before she forced her smile back into place. "Those are outdated," she tried, her voice sharper now, but the tremor underneath betrayed her. Before I could respond, a cousin from the back of the room stood. His voice cracked as he spoke. "I overheard you, Darlene. You said you were going to get rid of the old man." I kept quiet, but I can't anymore. The room erupted. Voices clashed, some defending her, others condemning her. Accusations flew like daggers. Chairs scraped against the floor, hands pointed, faces flushed. In the chaos, I remained seated, steady as stone. For years, my silence had been mistaken for weakness. Tonight, silence became my weapon. I let their noise bury her. When the shouting finally waned, Darlene slammed her fist on the table. "You think this ends here? I'll make sure you lose everything." The room fell silent. My grip tightened around my wife's will. Calmness washed over me, not the peace of surrender, but the steadiness of resolve. Tomorrow, her threat might turn into action, but so would mine. The battle lines had been drawn, not in private whispers, but in front of the entire family. And for the first time, I held the strength to see it through. The echo of last night's voices still clung to me the next morning, even as the sun crept across Asheville's hills, warming the streets with its light. I felt cold inside. The house was quiet, too quiet. A silence that should have brought peace instead sat on my chest like weight. I could still see Darlene's eyes flashing across the table, still hear her shrill declaration that I was too old to notice, too old to matter. Some of the family had already begun to scatter like leaves after a storm. I noticed it in the way cousins avoided my calls, in how a nephew crossed the street rather than stop to greet me. And yet, others quiet ones lingered by my gate when the sun was low, whispering words of support. "We know who you are," one said softly, eyes lowered as though afraid to be caught siding with me. Those words carried me, even as the shame of my daughter's betrayal lingered. It was like smoke after a fire, clinging to everything, seeping into my very skin. That morning, as I sorted through old carpentry tools in the shed, the phone rang. My heart stuttered when I heard the voice on the line. "Mr. Williams, this is Child and Family Services. We've received a complaint of elder neglect and concerns about your ability to care for yourself." The words sank in slowly, heavy as iron. My daughter hadn't just tried to erase me at the dinner table. She'd gone further, dragged strangers into our family war. I sat at the kitchen table, the wood cool beneath my palms, staring at the faded envelope still tucked in my jacket pocket, my wife's words, her warning, My mind replayed Darlene's voice, rehearsed lies spilling into ears that might not care enough to search for truth. For a moment, fear gnawed at me, at 70, with a heart that skipped beats and lungs that tired quickly. I knew how the world sometimes saw old men. Easy to dismiss, easy to strip of rights. The day of the interview came faster than I could prepare. The office smelled of antiseptic and paper, cold as stone. A woman with sharp eyes and a notepad sat across from me, asking questions that cut deeper than they seemed. Do you manage your finances? Do you prepare meals? Do you feel safe in your home? Each word felt like an accusation. Though her tone was calm, I answered steady, keeping my voice firm. But inside a knot tightened. What if they believed her? What if my own daughter succeeded in painting me as helpless, unfit, useless? But then, just as the walls seemed to close in, the door opened. Harlan, my neighbor for 20 years, stepped inside. His weathered hands held a folder. His voice sure as he told the social worker about the times he'd seen me fixing fences, splitting wood, mowing the yard. He's more independent than most men half his age, Harlan said, his gaze locking on mine, giving me a nod that felt like a lifeline. Moments later, another voice joined James, an old colleague from the carpentry shop. He held notarized records, proof of land ownership, financial accounts managed under my name, all signed and dated. The pages rustled like a hymn of truth. My throat tightened. But not from fear, this time from gratitude. I hadn't expected anyone to stand with me, not when family had already turned away. Yet here they were, anchors against my daughter's storm. The questions resumed. But something shifted. The social worker's pen no longer scratched so harshly. The air softened, suspicion replaced by curiosity. Darlene, seated a few chairs away, shifted in her seat, her lips pressed tight, her eyes sharp as glass. I felt her fury boiling just beneath her skin. Then it happened. Her composure cracked, her voice breaking into a shout that filled the room. I deserve that house more than him. He's just sitting in it, waiting to die. The silence that followed was heavier than any gavel. Even the social worker's pen froze mid-air. Gasps rose from the corner. Harlan stared at her as though seeing her for the first time. My heart ached, not from weakness, but from the cruelty of a daughter who had once clung to my hand as a child, begging me never to let go. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. My silence carried its own weight. In that moment, the truth was brighter than any defense. Her words had damned her more than mine ever could. When the interview ended, the verdict was clear. I was cleared of all suspicion. But the battle, I knew, was far from over. Darlene stormed out of the office, her shoes striking the floor like gunshots. Her eyes burned with vengeance as she hissed, "This isn't finished." I stepped out into the late afternoon sun, the keys to the house warm in my pocket, pressing against my palm. Those old brass teeth had unlocked doors for decades, and now they reminded me of something more: my legacy, my fight, my unshakable claim. The war wasn't over, but for the first time I felt steady. The storm was hers to unleash. The truth was mine to wield. The courthouse in Asheville looked colder than I remembered, its stone walls carrying the weight of every story like mine. That morning, the benches inside filled with family and strangers alike. I could hear the whispers bouncing from one corner to another, some pitying me, others wondering what would happen to the old carpenter who had built a life here and was now being dragged into court by his own daughter. Darlene sat across from me, her lawyer flipping through files with a smug kind of confidence. She didn't look at me directly. She didn't need to. Her posture set enough chin high, lips curled into a slight smirk, as if she had already won. I leaned on my cane, not out of weakness, but out of habit. My silence wasn't surrender. The judge called the case, and the words cut into me the way cold steel does. Darlene's attorney rose, painting a picture I barely recognized. Your Honor, my client only seeks what's best for her father. He's an elderly man, unable to maintain his property, forgetting things, and putting himself at risk. The house, it should pass to her for the family's future. Every word was poison wrapped in honey. They talked about me as though I weren't even in the room, as though I were a piece of furniture that could no longer hold its weight. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to breathe steady. My chest ached, not from weakness, but from the fury building inside. When my lawyer stood, the air shifted. He carried no theatrics, no grand gestures, just truth. He laid down documents, proof of taxes I had paid, repair receipts with my name signed at the bottom, bank records showing independence. Piece by piece, he built me back up from the ashes Darlene tried to scatter. Then came the neighbors, one by one. Mrs. Harlan spoke of seeing me mow the lawn every week, even with aching knees. A church member testified to the donations I quietly made each year, never once asking for recognition. Their words breathed air back into my lungs. For a moment, I wasn't invisible, but the real turn came with the envelope. My lawyer carefully pulled it from his file, a letter written years ago, signed and notarized by my late wife. Her words, steady in ink, said this house remains in his care until his last breath. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. I saw the judge lean forward, eyebrows raised. And then, like thunder rolling in after lightning, came the recording. A neighbor had captured Darlene's voice during one of her heated phone calls. I don't care about the family, it's about the cash. That house is worth more than his stubborn pride. The words echoed in the chamber, heavy and undeniable. I didn't move. I didn't need to. The look on her face said everything. The blood drained, eyes darting, mouth suddenly dry. The mask she had worn so proudly cracked right in front of everyone. The judge called for order, his gavel pounding like a hammer. This court will deliberate further, he said, voice firm. We will reconvene with a ruling. No verdict yet, but the weight had already shifted. As I rose from my seat, cane steady in hand, Darlene's glare cut across the aisle. She leaned close enough for only me to hear. If I can't win here, she hissed, I'll find another way. I walked out without a word, the courthouse steps cold under my feet, the house keys heavy in my pocket. The battle was far from over, but so was my silence. Leaving the courthouse that afternoon, the weight in the air was heavier than any gavel's strike. The verdict had not been finalized, yet the truth had already fractured us. Some of my children lingered in the hallway, avoiding my eyes as though I had become a stranger. Others whispered among themselves, their words slipping away like smoke, impossible to grasp but sharp enough to wound. Justice had leaned toward me in that courtroom, but family ties felt weaker than ever. The silence between us was not victory. It was loss. Back at the house, the rift became impossible to ignore. Half the family refused to step inside, their cars parked at the curb as though the threshold had become a line drawn in battle. Marcus, my eldest son, stood by the porch railing, his voice heavy with accusation. Dad, all this for pride, you've torn us apart. His words hit harder than Darlene's lies ever could. Yet in the same moment, my granddaughter slipped into my arms, hugging me tight, whispering, Grandpa, I believe you. That small voice, trembling with loyalty, was enough to keep me standing. But loyalty came at a cost. At Sunday dinner, the table that once held laughter and prayer became a stage for war. Twist S24 unfolded in front of me. Family members chose sides, not in whispers this time, but in open defiance. Some supported me, their faces flushed with anger at Darlene's betrayal. Others leaned toward her promises of a shared inheritance, their words poisoned by greed. Voices rose, plates went untouched, silverware clattered. My once warm home turned into a battleground where every word cut deeper than the last. Anger filled the air. Heartbreak sat heavy in my chest. Disbelief clouded the eyes of those I once thought unshakable. Later that evening, I sat alone in my study, the door shut against the noise that still lingered in my ears. Old photographs lined the desk, faces frozen in happier times. Looking at them, a painful truth settled in this fight was never just about the house. The struggle had uncovered what truly lived in each heart. Some cherished family, others cherished money. Memories of sacrifice rose unbidden nights spent working late shifts, years of scraping by to build the very roof now under dispute. Pride mixed with grief, loneliness sitting beside me like an unwelcome guest. Yet strength stirred too, faint but alive, whispering that dignity must endure even if love falters. It was near midnight when a knock jarred the silence. My lawyer stood on the porch, pale under the porch light, a letter trembling in his hand. His voice carried the weight of new betrayal. Darlene had filed another claim. And this time she wasn't alone. Outside investors were being pulled into the war. Strangers who cared nothing for legacy, only for profit. My chest tightened. Not just from the frailty of age, but from the realization that this fight had grown larger than blood. The war for my dignity was no longer confined within family walls. It was spilling into the world beyond, threatening to strip me of everything. The family gathered in the living room, expecting this to be the final discussion, the decisive moment where my resistance would finally collapse. Darlene arrived first, her heels clicking sharply against the wooden floor. Flanked by two strangers in suits, she carried a folder under her arm, documents she believed would seal my fate. Her smug smile told me she thought she had already won. But as I stood before them, cane in hand and heart steady, I felt the weight of my years not as a burden, but as armor. Every nail I had hammered, every night I had worked to build this home, every tear my wife and I had shed together, they had not been in vain. "You don't belong here anymore, Dad," Darlene said, waving the folder. "We've arranged for the house to be transferred. These gentlemen are here to finalize it. It's time you let go." I said nothing at first. The silence in the room stretched, thick with anticipation. My children and grandchildren shifted uneasily, caught between fear and curiosity. Finally, I reached into my jacket and placed a small stack of papers on the table. "Before you hand me my eviction," I said evenly, "let me share something you seem to have forgotten." I unfolded my evidence letters in my wife's handwriting, contracts notarized years ago, and recordings I had carefully saved. Every piece of paper bore the truth they had hoped would stay buried. Gasps rippled through the room, faces drained of color. Darlene's smugness faltered, her lips trembling as she recognized the documents. "You thought I was too old to notice, too weak to resist." I continued, "But I have been a carpenter all my life. I know how to build, and I know how to protect what I've built." Then came the final blow. I played the recording. Darlene's voice filled the room, cold and calculating. "I don't want the house for family. I want it for cash." The investors leaned back, expressions hardened with disgust. Chairs scraped as they rose, muttering that they would have no part in this. My other children shifted, some looking at me with shame, others glaring at Darlene. And then, the betrayal fully cracked open. Marcus, red with anger, turned on his sister. "You dragged us into this. Darlene, you promised we'd all share when he was gone. Now look what you've done." Voices clashed, grandchildren cried, the room fractured, loyalty breaking along jagged lines. For a moment, I felt the full weight of what had been exposed, not just their greed, but the collapse of the family I had spent a lifetime holding together. Yet amid the chaos, I found calm. I placed a hand on the table and spoke firmly, my voice cutting through the noise. "I gave you this home not with money, but with love and sacrifice. I did not raise you to turn family into profit." You tried to make me invisible, to erase me as if I never mattered. But I am still here, and I will not be erased. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. Darlene's face twisted with rage, but her power had evaporated. The investors walked out. My lawyer, standing at my side, confirmed the property remains solely yours. Their claims are void. One by one, family members left the house, some in shame, some in anger, some in tears. The betrayal cut deep, but dignity had been restored. That night, I sat on the porch alone, the sunrise painting Asheville in gold. For the first time in months, my chest felt light. The war had scarred me, but it had also reminded me of who I was. Family can be your greatest blessing, or your deepest wound, but dignity once lost can never be bought back. As the light warmed my face, I heard the creak of the porch steps. My youngest granddaughter walked quietly toward me. Without a word, she placed her small hand in mine. I looked at her, and in her eyes, I saw something pure hope. The war was over. Not all was lost.